Well, before starting the discussion, I would check with you if you agree with these two statements and to see if there is anything more that you want to put on the table. As a first question, I wanted to discuss about the dichotomy that exists between open and protected cultural data. We have heard from Milena that access to metadata, access to content is at the core of the creative processes. But we acknowledge that Europeana has done a lot of work in this sense. Despite recognizing the importance of being retrievable online, however, cultural institutions often lack the enthusiasm to share their content. Even if this approach, the open approach, can contribute to enhance the visibility of the content online, however, the real willingness to experiment with the content is not always there. We have studied in Europeana space something about giving access to a space that is protected in order to encourage content owners who are not ready to share their content openly to at least share their content in a protected space for experimental use. And this has created the discussion in Europeana space itself. Why to protect? We have to advocate openness. But nevertheless, this dichotomy is still there. So I would like to ask to the panelists first with a short speech and to the audience then, which are the lessons learned and how the content owners be motivated to open high-resolution content for use and reuse. And what do you think about this idea of a protected space? Do you think we should encourage people who do not feel ready to join the protected space, or this could be could produce a negative effect towards the openness of the content? So this is the first topic. And then we will move to the second after a first run of a comment on the first topic. So if there is no objection to the subject of discussion, I would leave the floor to our panelists. Okay, so we start. Thank you. And I would suggest that we go one by one. Then if you feel that your point of view was already taken by another panelist, you can move to the second round of questions. Thank you. And please be concise so we can leave a time for the debate.
Yeah, just coming in clear here. I guess with introductions as well, since we can't see a name tag or nothing. I'm Gregory Markus from the Netherlands Institute for Sound and Vision. This is the sound of my voice. And in the European Space Project, I'm in charge of the innovation space, which oversees the hackathons of business modeling and incubation. In terms of the first question, I think this is a very interesting dichotomy that is being presented. The term, the protected space and access to high. Nope. I was using my church voice. So I think one of the dangers here is setting precedent with providing access to closed content in a new way, because still you're providing access to closed content, and obviously this could be seen as institutions as actually something that's very valuable, saying like, okay, this is still protected, we can manage rights here, we can kind of manage the content and regain control of it, and have our cake and eat it too. Whereas so many efforts around the world now are really focused on just opening and opening and opening. This might, the protected space might be an answer, but it's also setting a very dangerous precedent in terms of access. Maybe a popular example with whereas Spotify and Apple Music and Dre Beats music are kind of a response to piracy. This is a solve all. I don't know how many of you actually pay for Spotify, but it's not that much, and it's a really great feature. But is it, the music industry doesn't believe that it's a savior, and musicians don't know if it's a savior as well, but the audience sure is happy. So it's definitely a thin line to walk, and I'm curious to see how the results of this project actually present how this works.
So hello, I'm Fred Truyen from Leuven University, and I'm also the president of Photo Consortium, which represents photo archives. And typically in Europe, photo archives are both public institutions and private institutions. And certainly since the photograph is an intellectual object and perfectly reproducible by digital means, the issue of copyrights is very central to the photographic business. And we see that there are many doubts within the content owners to participate in the sharing economy. And so we think that the closed space, which is of course not the end goal of a project like Europeana Space, the output should be publicly available, open content, but we want to lure in people who own content and who are unsure about their copyrights to taste of the experimentation that can be possible with new technologies based on their content. The fears of these people is that when new applications will be made that use their content, that it will be done by another professional sector like the games industry or the app developer industries, and that there is no piece of the cake left then for the content owner in the end run. So we want to make use of this closed space to bring these people together so that they can, in their business modeling, have an open discussion about how will revenue streams benefit all parties. So those who care for the content, because we should never forget that that kind of ownership entails a lot of responsibilities and work. It's not because you own a collection that you can manage your archive. There is a cost in managing an archive, and unfortunately not all archives in Europe can benefit from full state subsidy. There are many archives who are, for example, legally obliged to have part of their income from revenue from their activity. And so it's more to alleviate the concerns of these people that we came up with this idea. But as said, the closed space cannot remain closed. The whole idea is that things come out to the public.
Okay, Kamila Kutz, Goldsmiths, and Open and Hybrid Publishing Pilot with Jonathan Shaw here. I pretty much agree with, first of all, what Gregory was saying about setting up a dangerous precedent. For us, as an open and hybrid publishing pilot, the idea of protected space, in fact, runs slightly against our ethos, because we're really much more for openness. And I think there's a question there which Fred mentioned, which is that of funding. And I think that's, of course, at the heart of what we're trying to do here. And I think the experimentation should come from the experimenting with the open content, rather experimenting with the protected one, because we already know what the protected one does to a great degree. So, yeah.
I appreciate the acoustics in here are fabulous when we were listening to the organ music last night. But I think to hear voices, hopefully this is kind of legible and you can understand what we're saying. I think in terms of the pilot that we're exploring with open and hybrid publishing, what we're seeking to do really is to use the expertise of our team. So again, this is about a collective endeavor. So we use photography, and photography in the sense of media and the context and this shifting sort of paradigm that we have for that kind of field. And if we begin to think of what that could be when we think of open and hybrid, so in other words, we seek to remove this polarity between analog and digital, the fixed book and something that can evolve and kind of can grow, then actually I think we can begin to sort of explore the potentiality of today rather than, you know, be bound by the restrictions of the actuality. So I think some of the things that I think have been seeking to do there is very much sort of work with this open ethos. So for us, as Kamila was sort of explaining, a protected space doesn't work when you're trying to liberate kind of the traditions associated to photography. The only way we can do that is by taking more of a radical stance that basically says we need to do these things and we need to do these things openly, because if we believe that this is the right way of kind of working and moving forward, then we all need to be in this together. So it means that consequently value in the context of photography is taken out of that scarcity kind of model where, you know, it is held down into the copyright, and we see copyright around authenticity and kind of respect of somebody's work. But that ability to then adapt that and adopt it and take it and grow it takes that remix culture into something far more sort of interesting and kind of exciting. So then when we build experiences around that in publishing, actually the book is no longer this treasured artifact on a shelf. It's actually something far more inventive and exciting, as I think was demonstrated this morning, sort of earlier today, through Mark's kind of presentation of how do we experience these kind of performative sort of acts. Thank you.
Thank you, Jonathan. Yeah, before I talk about the protected space or the use of it, I want to talk about something from my stance as TV pilot, is that all of these spaces and platforms, they don't yet accommodate TV content or audiovisual content that well. And this is something that I think for us is very important to stress, is that there seems to be a sort of discrimination in the sense that TV or audiovisual content is handled as photo content, like it's just a thumbnail and description, and this is something that's very difficult for us to work with. So this is really something that I'd like to address with Milena from Europeana, also Nasos with the WITH platform, is that we would like to see more support for TV content. And then as in talking about the protected space, I want to add to the panel as well is that you have a mission, of course, as a museum or institution to make your content known to the public. So once you start thinking of putting your content into a protected space, I think you have to be really clear what your goal is going to be and not just put it on there to think, okay, so I'm just going to put it on there and make money off it, but really have a very strong sense of, okay, what is our digital strategy? Why are we putting it on this closed space? And how are we going to target developers to use it to make applications to spread it in use? It may be receive payment for it, but be very clear about why are you putting it in this protected, copyrighted space. So these are my 2 points I wanted to address.
Hello again. Europeana in general is a strong supporter of openness, and we have been continuously fighting for open the cultural heritage content during the years, with starting from the publishing the metadata under the CC0 back then in 2011 to the newly Europeana publishing framework. But we understand the fears of the content providers and also the concerns of how the content would be used. But we see also the other side by talking to the creative professionals that they want something they can use. So as a facilitator, we were thinking how to solve this. And I personally think that the Europeana Publishing Framework gives a good opportunity for that, because it gives to the content providers a sense of control. So it's up to them to decide how their users want to view their collection or what the users will do with this collection. And on the other hand, it gives enough room for experimentation and shows clearly the benefits. Okay, what do you get
in return of your content. And I think leading by example and showing what's possible, it's maybe the most convincing strategy.
I'm Carla Fernandez from the new University of Lisbon, and I'd like to talk, maybe it's a really different case from the previous speakers in the sense of the dance pilot. In our case, we're dealing with performers and with creators of very ephemeral types of art. In that sense, what's happening, and thinking of the lessons learned with this project, my feeling was that the artists, anyway, they are sharing, in order to collaborate, they are sharing with colleagues and with the dancers that they want to hire for their companies via YouTube or Vimeo. And that's because they're not worried, they're not used to having copyrights. This is not existing at all in Portugal yet. And this is, of course, not fair, but they didn't even think of it until the moment when we told them, can we use your material for such a known and huge repository such as Europeana? And then they retreat. So it's I feel it's a kind of need to have them included maybe in this process, maybe even before, so in advance, that they know exactly what they will be gaining with it. It's not they're aiming at big amounts of money, but that they know that that will augment their visibility, that there has real impact in their careers and augmented the numbers of audiences to watch the pieces and so on. So the question is really to involve them in the sense of knowing what these archives are in the first place. And what their reaction was until now, the choreographers we've worked with was, well, if you are getting money out of it, then we need our copyrights, which we never had before. But if not, then they are really generous and they are willing to offer their content. So it's really a very new issue for this community, and I hope this is a moment for challenging that.
Well, I think that we heard a lot of advocacy for openness. We heard also that it is necessary to think about a strategy, why to open content, and that with the demonstration of success stories, good benefits, the advocacy of openness can be more efficacious, can have better results. But still, I would like to have a feeling of what do you think about using the mechanism of a protected space to go towards openness. We heard before in the previous speech that an obstacle can become an opportunity to do better, to do more step ahead. So is the protected space a sort of an artificial obstacle that we create, and in order to show to people why to remain protected? If you stay protected, the results of the experiment cannot be shared. So I don't know. I think that at least in the light of the development of Europeana space, the understanding of the appreciation about this concept of protected space could be interesting. So may I ask a question to the audience? First, if there is anybody who wants to intervene. If not, can you express your opinion with your hand? Are you pro the protected space? Who is in favor of the protected space? And who is not in favor of the protected space? Well, this gives an idea that there is a large majority of the people who have no opinion on the protected space. This is what I understand.
Can I just say something about why the only hand up? Just to add, why my hand went up is not because I'm. It's a tricky one, because I think the protected space is there as a transitional space, and for the reasons that Fred was talking about and the reasons that Carla was talking about. And I think why we've set it up is because we acknowledge that we're working with such a wide community of cultural heritage creators and preservers and so on. As Milena talked about, it's a vast sector. It's many sectors combined. And just within our project, we have a number of those sectors represented, and each one of us has a very different relationship with the practitioner community and the creative community that we're working with. And while some of those communities, because of the work they're doing, is very advanced in terms of the principle and the practice of openness, some of those areas are at a different stage in that journey. And I think, I would endorse what Fred was saying, that certainly in the area of dance and performance, this is a sort of transitional space where those artists and those contributors of this work can see the value that could accrue because of their work becoming open. But it's not something that we should assume and, in fact, impose on them, because otherwise we will alienate them from this process. So this is about bringing them into a journey which has a philosophy of openness, but one which accepts that we're at different stages of that journey.
Thank you very much. Any other comment on openness and protection?
I would say that the protected space could pave the way to much more openness, because it allows testing in a protected area. And we know that different institutions have different business models, and I myself come from an institution which clearly states that we have the non-commercial, we are public and education, yes, but no commercial reuse. And as this is a politically agreed thing, which hopefully changes, and it changes even quicker if we have best practice examples. And we can produce this if we have places where we can produce them. Therefore, I think it makes much sense to have something like that in order to really show the positive effects.
Thank you very much. Any other comment? Yeah.
I'm from Vilnius Lithuanian Art Museum, and we have huge collections and digitized collections, so 6,000 exhibits are open images from, under license Creative Commons. But when it comes to curated data, when it comes to titles translated to other languages, when it comes to stories which actually are appealing to audiences, because nobody cares about images until story is not told. So the situation is that the curators and creative industries, if everything is go open, then they will be discouraged and they will not enter, because real business reasoning is needed to create something, to add something on the top of open data. So some data are open, but when it comes to economical paradigm, there is open data idea, but as well there is shared economy. And sharing is not necessarily opening, it's just about establishing value chain and making sure that all the parties in that chain get benefits. So that's why protected space is important to create those kind of chains where value is transferred and all the participants, they gain from the participating this chain. Otherwise, translations will be not done. Otherwise, we will get Europeana silo with not without controlled vocabularies, where artists are entered in very different spellings, and where the titles are in local languages. So we will remain with that silo if we will not introduce the business sense.
Thank you. Any other comment? Well, I guess that we got enough. Do you have something more? Yeah, thank you.
I mean, having said that earlier, that in a sense we took a particular stance, I think, and this may be purely, I've now spent too much time inside of an institution, an academic institution, but I think sometimes a terminology can really be a restrictive kind of mechanism. And I think the things that I've just been hearing there in terms of how and why people find this useful, you know, photography for my field is in abundance. People talk about it as this avalanche of images. In a sense, it isn't. You know, we choose the streams that we wish to follow, and there's many kind of, you know, writings, both public and accessible writings and more academic texts. But I think, you know, as soon as we begin to see things, I think, associated to that as play, in the same way that, you know, my children go to school and they are in a protected space, I don't regard that school as a protected space. I regard that as school as somewhere to learn and somewhere to play and engage and learn. And I think if perhaps when we talk about these sorts of areas and this perhaps more philosophically, then actually, if we're talking about something that offers a comfort, where somebody can feel at ease to engage, and where an institution can put their content where they have a current perception of value for play, so they are placed at ease in that space, and the people who they're wanting to work with have a shared endeavour to explore it. So in other words, there is a control placed around it for them to really try and maximize a new opportunity. So in other words, to change how they think, to change those mindsets, then I think we're into something really active and something very positive. But I think for me, the problematic is that sense of calling it protected sort of suddenly means that I wrap my child in bubble wrap when they leave the front door. You know, they do not learn in that sort of environment. And I think sometimes that type of terminology, for me, there is an immediate sort of retraction from. And I think, but I do appreciate, you know, people's, you know, this is also, and I think we'll talk about this shortly, about people's lack of understanding of open and hybrid. So in other words, you can still make money when you're dealing with a hybrid publisher. You can still make money when you're dealing with open content. So it's simply that you've placed the value into a different place. So that's a reflection, perhaps.
Thank you very much. More comments? Well, we heard a lot about the value of openness, the need of strategies, why to become open, and the need of best practices, but also the fact that probably we are in a transition phase, so we need instruments to accompany this transition phase, which is a space of experiment. So a question of terminology, how to call this space can make the difference, and a way to distinguish between data and information that are at the basis of experimentation, and data and information that are instead elements of business, because this has a difference. When we enter into sharing and making available at the open level something that has a real commercial value, probably it is necessary to reflect much more. Yeah, I thank you very much. I think that this gives us some more hints also for the future of what we are doing. And I would move now to the second question. While we try to develop products, and hopefully successful products, we know that a user-centered approach is fundamental. Users should be involved, and since the beginning in the work, the agile methodology in the technology and software development has demonstrated that there is a strong value in this approach. But involving users in the analysis of requirements, in the validation of early prototypes, in the evaluation of advanced phases, all this requires time, commitment, engagement, and identification of which are the benefits for the users. Because if we are not able to motivate the users, then either we risk to have users who are there for payment, and the result may be not to produce satisfactory results, or they are not really interested. And so as well, the results are not satisfactory because we are lacking real feedback. So which is, how can we engage with the user base in a modern and effective way? Something that goes also beyond the questionnaires and workshops, other ways that can have a larger user base. How the results of the work with the users should then be reflected in the actual development. Because we say that we want to have a user-centered approach, we want to involve the users, but then how it is reflected, the feedback that we get from the users, hopefully in a modern way, into the actual development. So do you have lessons learned, experiences, negative experiences to avoid the same mistakes? And I would give the floor first to our panelists and then to the audience. Thank you.
Again, in our case, we were developing a prototype for actually to assist the documentation of the creative processes. To give you an example, when a choreographer is rehearsing and working with the dancers, they can take notes on the video itself digitally instead of writing on paper and so on. So it's a tool to assist the composition of the creative process. And in that sense, we've done a lot of usability testings. And what I conclude is that not only, indeed, it's never enough. We didn't have such a huge sample of users. We should have more and more. But the strategy we are now thinking, since the prototype is ready, is that the only solution at the moment is that we offer this, and we've done it in the hackathon in Prague actually, we offer this prototype version to anyone interested, so the artists who were there, they had it installed in their computers. We track them, so we keep their mail, and we ask them, we monitor their use of the tool, so they get back to us and even help us saying, well, this was not working well, or even suggesting a new functionality, for example. And in this respect, so involving them as much as possible, and then when it's considered as a better version, that we definitely need then other help from companies who know how to locate the right marketing niches, so where they test it again, and where they help us with the distribution of these prototypes. So I think the idea is to first of all get the first users for us are the artists themselves. So during the whole process we were asking specific choreographers to use them in their daily routines and get their feedback, and that's how the prototype was developed. Even the functionalities were added by the suggestions of the choreographers themselves, and then asking as many people as possible in varied sectors, so students, people who normally attend dance, professors, all kinds of, involving them as much as possible to get that's what we've until now managed to do.
Thank you.
Well, we think we all agree that the connection with the user is really crucial for development of any product and services. And at the Europeana hackathons, well, we've been always in a facilitator role, not the actual creators. But I would say that the process starts really with the developer of the products and the services. They should know who the user is, or if they don't know for sure, then they should start with the hypothesis about this user and constantly test and refine. And there are many ways to test this hypothesis and to decide whether these are the right users for your product or not. And on top of the workshops and the classical form of user testing, there are also some guerrilla user testing techniques. As you mentioned, the developers can just go on the street and pick users which meet their user profile, and interview them and test the product on the site. I'm not a user experience designer myself, so I wouldn't go very specific in very much detail here. But I'd like to point one more thing. How the user feedback is incorporated in the development. There are three elements which we should take into account, or any developer of product services should take into account. First is, okay, what are the user needs? Secondly, what are the business goals of the product? And third, what is feasible, I mean, in terms of resources to do whatever it is. And then the cross point of all these three things is the solution for the product development.
Yeah, so for the TV pilot, using a user-centered approach, I think, is just the biggest challenge for us, especially since we have one scenario that focuses on the elderly, and their expectations and knowledge of technology is way different than mine is. Actually, one of the first things I did was create personas, just to get an idea, maybe also in the developer's head, of like, who are we developing for? What are their technical skills? What are they expecting? And I made profiles for the personas, and I gave them names from my favorite TV show, The Office. So we had Jim, Dwight, and Pamela, and I thought it was really great. And then no one really cared about these personas when we were doing the development. It's very difficult to sort of get that in the minds of developers. So in terms of lessons learned, I think one thing that I see an opportunity for is one of the developers for Samsung came up to me when I presented the elderly scenario, and he said, well, we're really interested in this because actually our biggest market for smart TVs are older people. They spend a lot of money on this technology, and they don't understand it that well, but they want to use it. And I think that creates the biggest sort of incentives for developers and for people like us to really start engaging with this audience, see what they want, and connect that market segment more with developers themselves. I'm really looking forward to doing some user testing so I can actually have feedback on paper that I can show to the developers to say, this is really what they're expecting, and this isn't a good feature, and this is. So hopefully that will help.
On the basis that open and hybrid publishing seems to have kind of slightly dominated this panel, if I perhaps talk about the next phase for our pilot, and I think Kamila will perhaps expand a little bit more on the evaluation that we've undertaken to date. Is that okay? I think the key thing we need to remember both, and the reason that we chose photography as our vehicle to sort of explore open and hybrid publishing is the level of sophistication of the user is astounding. Photography isn't in that space where it is down to the professional. They are now very much in the minority. So if we then take that same approach to publishing, what does that? How can we sort of begin to tap into that sort of sense of expertise? So the statistics tell us that digital publishing is growing and getting bigger and bigger, and publishers are selling more in this arena. But for us, I suppose we were very much interested in this more experimental approach around our kind of pilot. We'd done things and created various different forms of publishing where the book is seen as a living organism, but these were very much text-based. So these were both working with colleagues inside my kind of department, Gary Hall, Joanna, who somehow manages to be in Moscow while we're here. But they often were very much still about the written word in the context of the book. So for us, we were keen to sort of explore what that might mean for an image. And I think given the complexity of copyright, the phase that we're into now is looking at a creative call for how we might understand and therefore play and creatively understand the idea of publishing images, engaging in the concept of photography today, so that we have a social space inside of our book, We have an exhibition space, so anybody and everybody can both get involved in the publication itself and how that may kind of evolve. So I think, you know, a slight plug, if you're interested, our banner is over there. It would be great to see more and more people engaging and playing and exploring the databases, because I think sometimes people aren't sure where they can get access to open images, or they presume that images that are inside Twitter or inside Facebook, because they can have them on their device and they can just simply access them, that means it is free and they are open because they're on their screen. We can take a screen grab, and there's many interesting I think interpretations of appropriation in that context. So the more that we can engage people in the play of that, and they can be part of this publishing process, then I think hopefully the educator in me says we will learn far more. So I think, you know, for us, this sense of a book is about how we can produce various iterations of that, and in principle for us that means create various kind of chapters through our publication.
Thanks for that, Jonathan. But also something we haven't actually mentioned so far, but we did a series of tests with students at different institutions, and we also sent a questionnaire that explored the features of our book to a few of our friends, professionals. And one of the things that kept continuously popping up in the students, MA and BA filmmaking and photography students, was that they loved the idea of curating book. It's the curating we haven't talked about yet, and that's where it's protected for people in that respect. Because if there's anybody that artists trust these days, they're curators, and there are as many art producers and curators these days as there are artists. And I think there's still, I think that's something that we're also trying to get people to understand, Fred, yeah, with the MOOCs and the idea of, you know, giving people power to the people within, you know, a certain reason. And there is an experimentation, I think, in that. But we really need to, I think what we really need to test a little more, maybe with your protective space, actually with the curators. Really, because these are the people who understand the art they will be curating, they have contacts, they have networks. I mean, try and ask people like, I don't know, try and ask Tacita Dean, one of the leading UK artists, to give you a still for free. She's not going to do that, like many artists want, but she'll probably be open to an idea of, you know, somehow experimenting, as long as there are people involved that she knows and she can trust. I think the curators is something that we need to think a little bit more. So yeah, maybe I'll just stop there for now, yeah.
So I think when we talk about heritage photography, that's the part that we do. You have the contemporary photography and then the whole world of today, which is present in the photo mediations, and you have the heritage photography. Then I would say photography is more than aesthetics. It's about emotions, and the photo is a shared emotion. A shared emotion where we express how we experience and see the world and shape the world. And very famous photographs and photographers have shaped our vision on conflicts, on how we want to live, on what our aspirations are. And so when we talk about user requirements and user engagement, I want to talk about the user as a stakeholder, as the person who has a cultural and moral relation to the photo and has a stake in the story of the photo. And this is what we want to do in the photo pilot. We make environments where the users can tell their own stories about the photo and generate this kind of context that explains how this testimony of the past touches them and their lives. And I must say, the events that we then organize for users, like bring your own photo memories to an archive, these are extremely emotional events where people come with their stories. You really have to work them out in the evening because they keep talking about their city and the life in the past, etc. And this is for us user experience. It's not so much the requirements, how big should the photo be on the screen or whatsoever. It is more having people take ownership of these photos. And I think there is also an answer to the first question in that, where rights in photography are until now have been defined too much as copyrights, and it's a boring thing, and as Jonathan has explained, it is not really real any longer. I think what we now see is that there are these cultural rights of communities, of people who want access to their memories. These are expressed in these photos in the archives, and I think this is what we want to facilitate with initiatives like Europeana Space, is giving people this access to their shared emotions and memories.
Thanks. I think this is a super interesting question, and I'm glad you started down there, because now I've been thinking about this for the past 15 minutes, and maybe I'll use the next 15 minutes. In terms of user-centered approach and developing platforms for users that they actually want, I think in massive EU projects with 26 partners with so many different things going on, I think a lot of this really starts in the preliminary design, making sure that your business model research, that your user engagement, and that all your research is being done beforehand, so you kind of hit the ground running going in, and so that all partners know when they sign up and agree, okay, this is what we'll be working towards as we move forward over the next 3 years. I think that's something really important, starting way before you actually begin the development. I also think another interesting thing is not so much, and I'm going to play a little like devil's advocate here, but not so much developing for users but also marketing. So, good marketing can make someone want and use something that most likely they didn't know that they wanted to use. And I definitely think, I was just at an event earlier this week that was telling heritage institutions to kind of lose their modesty, and I think as public institutions, we do verge more on the modest side than, say, a Coca-Cola or an Apple would in terms of being in your face with branding and engagement and being, this commercial mindset. Not that we have to make money as heritage institutions, public institutions, but really selling our content and making that value known to people and making our products known to people. So I think this is another integral thing that goes into project planning and project composition, is having just a specific marketing partner within a project that this is all they do. They're not attached to a heritage institution. They might be more of a corporate partner. But branding, solidarity within the project, shared goals, shared aims, everyone working towards the same goals. I think this is also really important. Just making everything cohesive as everyone is moving forward, so it's not kind of scatterbrained. And this could also probably be applied internally at institutions. I know cultural heritage institutions are so strapped for funding, but putting a lot of effort into marketing is also something very valuable. I mean, you look at what the Rijksmuseum has done, and everyone says Rijksmuseum, 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 but they have a lot of money, and so they have a marketing team the size of some heritage institutions' entire faculty. And so I think these are really things to focus on, preliminary planning, not putting the cart before the horse, and also project composition and project branding and solidarity. So those are my thoughts.
Again, we heard different points of view about involvement of users, from the testing to the co-creation, the emotional involvement, and marketing and communication. Any other experience? Is there anything else that you wanted to share from the audience? May I ask another time a question to everybody? How many of you have been involved as a user in projects of other people? How many of you acted as a user, contributing to a project of others? Yeah. And how many of you instead have involved the users in testing your project? Okay, interesting to see that there are more people asking for users to test your product, to validate your product, but less people who have been involved in the testing and the assessment of other projects. I don't know, but to me, this says that we probably need marketing and communication much more, because it seems that there is a demand which is not fully served by an offer of users. Anybody wants to comment on this? Sarunas.
I think we have the overall situation, which actually is commented a lot of times. We tend to involve users to test features of something we invent, we have, and in a lot of cases that has nothing to do with value for users. So that's, I think, the main disease we have in the industry. Even hackathons, usually they are just for people that are trying to develop new features, to demonstrate, to be proud about new features. But distance between features and value is quite a big. So we are very, very technical, and we are very our domain oriented in a lot of cases. That's why we need users, but somehow we do not respond to other invitations to test their stuff, because usually that is not relevant. So we lose relevance, and this should be improved quite a lot. So we have to, I think, create some generic business models or use case models to see where our features will be used. Otherwise, there is no value about these features.
Thank you. Well, any other comment from the audience? If not, I think that we have reached on time at the end of our roundtable. Do you have any further comment? We have reached on time at the end of our roundtable. Thank you very much. And I want first of all to bring you the present of the Ministry of Culture of Estonia, one for each panelist. And thank you for the present to the Ministry.